And look what it says here. Trump waved off Israeli strike after divisions emerged in his administration. So it says here, Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks. Ooh, I wonder why. Maybe it's because the United States is not really interested in getting into war with Iran right now. Maybe it's because, I don't know, Trump is supposed to be the anti-war guy. I hope that this remains and that we don't do something insane like actually go to war with Iran, but who knows what's going to happen. But for the time being, if this story is true, and I have reason to believe that it is, I'm glad that the United States told the Israelis to shut their mouths and stop pushing the United States to have a war, another major war in the Middle East. According to administration officials and others briefed, etc., Mr. Trump made his decision after months of internal debate over whether to pursue diplomacy or support Israel in seeking to set back Iran's ability to build a bomb at a time when Iran has been weakened militarily and economically. So Iran has been weakened militarily because it lost Hezbollah, it lost Assad, the Houthis are being bombed. So now everyone's thinking, okay, Israel's logic is, okay, Iran is weakened, it's been diminished tremendously. Now is the time to hit the Iranians. Let's hit them when they're weak. Let's prevent them from getting a nuke. And the U.S. said, no, we're not going to get involved. Ooh, I wonder why that is. Now, I've mentioned Eldridge Colby before, and Eldridge Colby is about to be sworn into the Trump administration as a major influencer for U.S. foreign policy. Now, it's very interesting because Donald Trump is a very pro-Israel guy, so it seems, and Eldridge Colby is not. And if you don't believe me, you could look into this yourself. Eldridge Colby did an interview with Tucker Carlson not too long ago, and he told Tucker Carlson, Tucker, are we going to get ourselves entrenched in yet another war in the Middle East? And he was speaking about America's policy towards Israel. He said, are we going to get involved in this whole quagmire of this conflict between Israel and Iran? Do we really want to do this? And he is critical of this pro-Israel policy, which has been the status quo for a very long time, which has been very popular for a very long time, but it has diminished in popularity within the U.S. government, but it has especially diminished in popularity within American society in general. And so it looks like this Tucker Carlsonism could be penetrating the government. It looks like the Eldridge Colby way of thinking, which is very close to the Tucker Carlson way of thinking, is entrenched in the U.S. government. And the United States is telling the Israelis, we're not going to get involved in this. We don't want to sit here and bomb Iran for you. We don't want to do this. And this is, of course, pissing off the Israelis, and the Israelis want America to bomb Iran. For many years, the Israelis have been trying to goad the Americans to join a conflict and fight the Iranians, and the Americans have said no. And in fact, I think back when Obama was president, Israel tried to goad the Americans into a war with the Iranians, and it didn't work. In fact, Obama did the Iran deal, which the Israelis hated. And what is the Trump administration doing now? What's Steve Witkoff talking about now? Oh, making a deal with the Iranians. Oh, my God. I thought that the Iran deal was this terrible idea and so horrible. Look what Obama did. He made the Iran deal. He made the Iran deal. Woo, hoo, hoo. And what's Trump trying to do? Trying to do a deal with the Iranians. Oh, remember when conservatives were saying that Obama was an appeaser and that Obama was like Neville Chamberlain with Hitler and this is appeasement. But when Trump wants to work a deal, well, it's not appeasement. Now it's just, it's the art of the deal. Trump doesn't want war. It's all bullshit, guys. And if you look at the deal that the Trump administration wants to hammer out, it's not too different from what Obama established. And the U.S. pulled out of the Iran deal under Trump. And what happened? Iran said, okay, well, we're going to go and make a big nuclear bomb. Good luck. See you later. Sayonara. And that was that. And now the Americans want to make another deal. They should have just kept the deal that they had. So it says here that the debate highlighted fault lines between historically hawkish American cabinet officials, Zionists, that just means American Zionist politicians, and other aides more skeptical that a military assault on Iran could destroy the country's nuclear ambitions and avoid a larger war. And if you bomb the hell out of Iran and if you spark a war, it'll be a war that will last for years. And, the Persians, the Iranians, I don't want to say Persians because the Parthians weren't exactly Persians, but the Iranians, well, they kind of contributed to the death of the Roman Empire to a certain extent. Because the Romans, they defeated a lot of people. They went to war in various parts of the world. Their empire was humongous. And what happened with the Roman Empire? Well, they fought against an Iranian people called the Parthians. Now, the Parthians were not Persians, but the Parthians were a mix. They were an Iranian people that were mixed with Scythian, but nonetheless an Iranian people. And they defeated the Romans over and over and over again. And I do not want to see the U.S. become like the Roman Empire, fighting the Parthians. But the Israelis, they want to push the Americans into a war with the Parthians. And it will be ugly. If it happens, it'll be very ugly. Sure, America can bomb the hell out of Iran easily, but when you put ground forces in Iran, that's a whole different game. And you would be seeing a lot of those American flag draped coffins returning back to the U.S. And it'll be very depressing and gray and very sad for the United States. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that happen. And the Israelis don't give a damn. They want to use the Goyim. They want to use the Americans as tools. They want to use the Russians as tools to fight their enemies. And that's why the Israelis begged the Americans not to push the Russians out of Syria, because the Israelis want to cling on to Russia against the Turks. The Israelis want to use more powerful countries as proxies. And for now, I'm glad that the Americans have said, for now, that they are not going to get involved in this nonsense. Israeli officials had recently developed plans to attack Iranian nuclear sites in May. They were prepared to carry them out, and at times were optimistic that the United States would sign off. The goal of the proposals, according to officials briefed on them, was to set back Tehran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon by a year or more. Almost all of the plans would have required U.S. help, not just to defend Israel from Iranian retaliation, but also to ensure that an Israeli attack was successful, making the United States a central part of the attack itself. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that Israel is overrated. Israel is an overrated power. It is a regional power, don't get me wrong, but all this talk about the invincible Israeli armed forces is bullshit. Yes, they're very tough fighting Hamas, very tough fighting the Houthis, very tough fighting Hezbollah, sure. But when it comes down to fighting Iran, Israel needs help. Well, I thought Iran was just some backwards medieval-style country. They're not. Iran is a very innovative country. Iran is a country that can be just as innovative as Israel. It's already just as innovative as Israel. You can go onto YouTube and type in the names of random Iranian cities, and you will see the cities of Iran, the metropolitan centers of Iran. They look very modern. They look much cleaner than American cities. Iran is not a joke. It is not a joke. Yes, its economy has been greatly diminished, but even under all this stress, Iran is still a threat to the Israelis, and Iran still inspires fear in the heart of the Israelis. And that's why the Israelis need the help of the Americans. Why can't the Israelis fight this war on their own? Why do they need the Americans? Because they don't have the ability to fight a serious war. They don't have the ability to fight Turkey on their own. They don't have the ability to fight Iran on their own. So that's why they want to push the Americans. That's why they want to push the Russians against their enemies. So it says here that for now, Mr. Trump has chosen diplomacy over military action. Now remember, Trump ran as what? An anti-war guy. So if Trump's going to start talking about, oh, well, yeah, let's go to war, people are going to be saying, all the Dave Smiths of the internet are going to be saying, what is this, 2003? This is bullshit. So it says here that in his first term, he tore up the Iran nuclear deal negotiated by the Obama administration. But in his second term, eager to avoid being sucked into another war in the Middle East, he has opened negotiations with Tehran, giving it a deadline of just a few months to negotiate a deal over its nuclear program. Well, why do they want a deal? Speaking to reporters on Thursday, Mr. Trump took issue with the idea that he had waved off Israel. Of course, he's not going to say this in public, but acknowledged that negotiating with the Iranians was his preferred course of action. He added that he was not in a rush to support military action against Iran, but reiterated that he did not want Tehran to have a nuclear weapon. I think that Iran has a chance to have a great country and to live happily without death, Mr. Trump said. That's my first option. If there's a second option, I think it would be very bad for Iran, and I think Iran is wanting to talk. It says here that earlier this month, Mr. Trump informed Israel of his decision that the United States would not support an attack. He discussed it with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu when Mr. Netanyahu visited Washington last week, using an Oval Office meeting to announce that the United States was beginning talks with Iran. So remember that Israel for many years has been saying, no talks with Iran, no appeasement, just military action. And then what happened? Donald Trump, right in the face of Netanyahu recently, says what? He says, we're in talks with Iran. What? Yeah, we're in talks with Iran. You mean like Obama was? Yeah. So that Iran deal wasn't so bad after all. I thought it was a huge disaster and it was a big mess. I guess not. I guess the F not. In a statement delivered in Hebrew after the meeting, Mr. Netanyahu said that an agreement with Iran would work only if it allowed the signers to go in, blow up the facilities, dismantle all the equipment under American supervision. So Netanyahu said, okay, we can have talks, but those talks are only going to work if America supervises us blowing shit up in Iran. Well, that's America getting involved in a war between Israel and Iran. This article is based on conversations with multiple officials briefed on Israel, etc., etc. So it says here that Israel has long planned to attack Iranian nuclear facilities, rehearsing bombing runs and calculating how much damage it could do with or without American help. So the Israelis are preparing for a conflict without American help. And so if America abandons Israel, and I believe that eventually America will abandon Israel. I know it's hard for people to believe that, but I believe it's going to happen. If America abandons Israel, if the lovers of the harlot abandon the harlot, to use the book of Revelation, Israel is finished. And I think that's what's going to happen eventually, is that Israel is going to have to face the war by itself, and there's going to be a second Holocaust. I've said this many times, and I'm going to keep saying it. So it says here that initially, at the behest of Mr. Netanyahu, senior Israeli officials updated their American counterparts on a plan that would have combined an Israeli commando raid on underground nuclear sites with a bombing campaign, an effort that the Israelis hoped would involve American aircraft. But Israeli military officials said the commando operation would not be ready until October. Mr. Netanyahu wanted it carried out more quickly. Israeli officials began shifting it to proposals. Israeli officials began shifting to a proposal for an extended bombing campaign that would have also required American assistance, according to officials briefed on the plan. Some American officials were at least initially more open to considering the Israeli plans. General Michael E. Kurilla, the head of U.S. Central Command, and Michael Waltz, the national security advisor, both discussed how the United States could potentially support an Israeli attack. Blah, blah, blah. There's a big if here, if Trump backed the plan. With the United States intensifying its war against the Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen, General Kurilla, with the blessing of the White House, began moving military equipment to the Middle East. So the Americans began moving all this military technology, naval boats, bombers, to the Middle East, or to the, the Garcia Island on the Indian Ocean. In a meeting this month, one of several discussions about the Israeli plan, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, presented a new intelligence assessment that said the buildup of American weaponry could potentially spark a wider conflict with Iran that the United States did not want. So remember a number of weeks ago, they were talking about, all these naval ships are going to the Middle East, and they're going to the, the Garcia Island and the Indian Ocean, and yada, 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 and the Americans are bringing bombers. They're bringing this bomber into the Middle East, and it looks like, oh my God, it looks like America is getting ready to bomb Iran. What's going on? Blah, 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 blah. Well, according to this article, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, presented a new intelligence assessment saying, putting all this American military technology in the Middle East and on this Garcia Island, it could provoke a war between the Iranians and the Americans, and we don't want that. A range of officials echoed Ms. Gabbard's concerns in the various meetings. Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Vice President J.D. Vance all voiced doubts about the attacks. And what do all these people have in common? What does Pete Hegseth have in common with Vance? What does Tulsi Gabbard have in common with these figureheads? They're all about that America First ideology. And so they're saying, okay, we know that Israel is terrified of the Iranians, and we got all this military hardware over there in the Middle East and all this stuff, but we don't want to provoke a war with the Iranians. We don't want that. And Pete Hegseth is talking about how we got to shift our focus more to China. We got to shift our focus more to the southern border. We got to fixate our focus on other matters other than what? Other than Europe? And perhaps the Middle East? And perhaps that's the reason why the U.S. has commenced troop withdrawal from Syria. Because they want to give the mantle of defender of Syria. They want to give the mantle of NATO military power over Syria to Turkey. And that's the plan. They want to give Syria over to the Turks. Even Mr. Walls, frequently one of the most hawkish voices on Iran, was skeptical that Israel's plan could succeed without substantial American assistance. So Mr. Walls has said, excuse me, Israel, this plan is not going to work without substantial American military support, and we don't want to do that. Because getting involved in a war in Iran is going to require what? Lots of money, lots of soldiers, a lot of people are going to die, it's going to be high casualties on our side, people are going to hate the Trump administration, they're going to say all of our poor good old boys are being killed over there in Iran, this bastard, I thought he was anti-war. They don't want that. I don't think they want that. The recent meetings came shortly after the Iranians said that they were open to indirect talks, communications through an intermediary. In March, Mr. Trump had sent the Trump and Ayatollah are pen pals. In March, Mr. Trump had sent a letter offering direct talks with Iran, an overture that Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, the supreme leader, had appeared to reject. But on March 28th, a senior Iranian official sent a letter back signaling openness to indirect talks. So initially, Ayatollah Khomeini said, we're not interested in talks, but now they are. So it looks like the Iranians want a deal because they want to lift the sanctions up. In other words, it could be that I was right about what I said about the future of American-Israeli relations. You see, before Trump entered office, I did a number of videos on this topic, and I said America will abandon Israel. I'm not saying it's going to happen under Trump. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but I'm saying eventually it's going to happen. So I think this is a gradual sign towards that denouement, right? It's a gradual sign towards that end. It's a gradual step. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing the gradual shift towards that denouement, towards that end in which Israel will be abandoned. And as the Bible says, her lovers abandon her. And so you're seeing it, I think. I think you're seeing the shift. Israel says, we got to bomb Iran. U.S. says, no, we're not interested. No, we're not interested in a war with Iran. And Iran and Turkey are both existential threats to Israel. So if Israel is left to fend for itself, Israel's screwed. There was even an Israeli military expert, I think he was a high-ranking IDF guy, and he said, if you look at the bombing of Israel that took place last year by Iran, sure, Israel, with the help of the U.S., was able to intercept a lot of those missiles. But again, that was with the help of the U.S. It wasn't with the help of the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome didn't really play a huge role. It was mainly the American support that blocked those missiles. But some of those missiles managed to land. And they were very fast. The ones that managed to land were pretty fast. And so the Iranians, they were what? What were they doing? What was the strategy of the Iranians? They were distracting the Israeli interceptors with certain drones and missiles. And then as the Israelis and the Americans were focusing on certain projectiles, certain Iranian missiles were allowed to go right through the guard of Israel and hit Israel itself. And so there was an expert opinion that I read not too long after this happened that said, imagine if just one of those missiles that hit Israel was armed with a nuke. Just imagine that. Small little country like Israel, one nuke would devastate the country. So and it was the U.S. that intercepted the majority of those projectiles. Without the U.S., Israel is screwed. It's screwed. I hate to say it, but it's screwed. The future is not going to be good for Israel. They wanted Saddam gone. Remember that? The Israelis wanted Saddam Hussein gone. They got what they wanted. And what did that lead to? The rise of Iran. The Israelis wanted Assad gone. What did that lead to? The rise of Turkey and Syria. And now, thanks to Israeli and American plans for the Middle East, now Israel is facing a massive existential threat, 2 existential threats. So they were better off just having to deal with, Hamas and some Houthis. They were better off dealing with those people. But they said, no, we got to remove this, and these people are an existential threat, and Assad is part of this axis of evil, and blah, blah, blah. And then what happened? They got rid of Saddam, that led to the rise of Iran. They got rid of Assad, that led to the rise of Turkey. And now they're facing 2 existential threats. Now they're facing the biggest threats that they have ever faced in their existence. It's quite a disaster. Quite a disaster for Israel. Not looking good for the Israeli state. So it says here that in one discussion, Mr. Vance, with support from others, argued that Mr. Trump had a unique opportunity to make a deal. Ooh. So J.D. Vance supports a deal with the Iranians? I remember when Obama was president, they were saying that's appeasement. You're just like Neville Chamberlain. Now they're saying, oh, actually, no, a deal is a good idea. And remember, the Israelis were up in arms. Remember, they were utterly pissed off over the United States making a deal with the Iranians. And now Trump is doing the same damn thing. And Vance says, maybe we can make a deal with the Iranians. If the talks failed, Mr. Trump could then support an Israeli attack, Mr. Vance said, according to administration officials. So, listen, the Israelis, I think eventually there's going to be a war between Iran and Israel. How much the United States will get involved, I don't know. But what I do believe is that eventually Israel's going to be left to fend for itself. And there's that verse in the book of Numbers where Balaam, the Babylonian wizard, goes before the Hebrews and he declares a prophecy. And he says, Eber will be destroyed. Eber, what's Eber? Hebrew. Eber. The Hebrew people came from the line of Eber. Read the Table of Nations in the book of Genesis. You'll read the sons of Shem. Read the genealogy, not the Table of Nations, but read the genealogy of Abraham. It goes from Shem to Eber And from Eber, eventually, you will have Abraham. And who are the descendants of Eber? The Hebrews and the Arabs. And which nations do the Iranians want to destroy? The Saudis, the Arabs, and the Jews. So right there in the book of Numbers, it says, it proclaims the prophecy, the destruction of Eber. It says Eber will be destroyed. And if you look at the Hebrew word for destroyed, it literally translates to extinction. They will be extinct. And there is a spirit that is rising. It is a spirit that desires the destruction of the Jews. It is a spirit that desires and longs for the extinction, the extermination of the Jewish race. That's why this guy recommended to me this, or told me about this Twitter account by some Nazi, and I'm reading the Twitter account, this Corey Mahler guy, and Corey Mahler is saying, I dream of a day when my children will only hear about Jews reading the Bible. That means you want the world to be Juden free, Jewish free of Jews. And so this is the spirit that's rising up. It's a spirit of mass murder. It's a spirit of genocide. It's a spirit of Nazism. And as critical as I am of Israel, I don't want to see a Holocaust. I don't want to see genocide. I don't want to see mass murder. We've seen enough death as it is already, damn it. Why in the hell do we need to see more death? But that's what people want. Not all people, obviously not, but that's what too many people want. And their ranks are swelling. It says here that during a visit to Israel earlier this month, General Kurilla told officials there that the White House wanted to put the plan to attack the nuclear facility on hold. Oof. So an American general told the Israelis, listen, let's put that plan to attack an Iranian nuclear facility on hold. Yeah, let's not do it. No. We're not interested in doing it. Now remember, when Biden was president, the United States helped Israel to defend against the Iranian attacks. And I remember reading what the Biden administration told the Israelis. The Biden administration said, listen, we can help you out. We'll help defend you. But as far as doing a direct war with Iran, you are on your own. This is what the Biden administration told the Israelis. You are on your own. And it looks like a similar trend is transpiring within the Trump administration. Israel, we can help you here and there, help you against the Houthis, but as far as a direct war with Iran goes, that's something we don't want to do, at least not right now. Now again, it could happen, the future, time will tell, who knows, but from what I am seeing, and from what I have read, I believe eventually Israel will be abandoned. And I think what we are seeing currently is this gradual shift towards that denouement. That's what I believe. Mr. Netanyahu called Mr. Trump on April 3rd. So here's Mr. Netanyahu urgently going to the phone. Got to call the president up. Got to call him. Why did Netanyahu pay a visit? Why did Netanyahu pay a visit to Trump recently? Why? I'll tell you why. It's because the Israelis are scared to death of Turkey. And the Israelis said, Turkey, America, do something about Turkey. And what did Trump tell Netanyahu to his face? He said, Natan, you have to be reasonable. We can make a deal with the Turks. We can solve this issue, but you have to be reasonable. You have to be reasonable. In other words, Israel, shut up. Because Turkey controls the Dardanelles. I've talked about this numerous times. There is those Dardanelles, the Straits of Turkey. Very important geopolitical position that Turkey holds. And America doesn't want to lose that. And so now the United States has begun a troop withdrawal from Syria. What's that about? Well, for years, the Turks have been telling the Americans, withdraw from Syria, leave Syria, we can take care of it. And what did Trump say in his first term? He said, let someone else take care of it. That someone else was Turkey. And what did Trump say not too long after entering office? He said, Turkey holds the future for Syria. Why? Because they want to give Syria over to the Turks. But they're trying to maintain this line between making sure that another Holocaust doesn't happen and not losing Turkey. Because the biggest fear that America has when it comes to Turkey is Turkey going to the side of the Russians. And the Russians wouldn't mind making a deal with the Turks. You know, in Russia, there's this whole ideology of Eurasianism. I know that Mr. Dugin was a big proponent of this idea of Eurasianism and kind of making this alliance between Russia and Turkey and other Asiatic countries. And so Russia wouldn't mind making a deal with Turkey that would allow Russia to have unlimited access into the Mediterranean. In fact, one of the things that happened before World War I was Russia making a deal with the Ottomans that allowed the Russians, or that supposedly allowed the Russians to have unlimited access into the Mediterranean. And not too long after that, the Austrians annexed Bosnia because Austria wanted to annex Bosnia. Russia said, we don't like that. Turkey said, okay, Austria, don't worry, I'll handle this. Turkey, the Ottomans tell the Russians, listen, we'll give you unlimited we'll allow you to have unlimited movement within the Mediterranean, and you allow Austria to annex Bosnia. Russia said, deal. There was a deal. Because of that deal, Austria annexed Bosnia. The Archduke was murdered. World War I broke out. So, but historically speaking, the Russians didn't mind making a deal with the Turks. I could see that happening. So America doesn't want that to happen. So America is like, listen, Israel, we know you're terrified of the Turks, but you got to be reasonable. You got to shut your mouth here. And it was like that scene between Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci in that Casino movie when they're in the desert and Joe Pesci is giving a tongue lashing to Robert De Niro. It was like, I think it was something, I mean, I don't think so. I'm saying this jokingly, but it kind of reminds me of that. And so the Americans are trying to toe this line between, okay, appeasing Israel, appealing to Israel, appealing to Turkey, not wanting to lose Turkey. It's a very difficult situation for the United States. So what is America going to do? This is why I say, I think as time goes on, we're going to be seeing the Americans becoming less and less supportive of Israel. And the fact that you have Eldridge Colby in the Trump administration, and he is critical of Israel, he doesn't want the U.S. to be involved in Israel, I think that is an indication of this trend that's coming. So it says here that Mr. Netanyahu arrived in Washington on April 7th, while the trip was presented as an opportunity for him to argue against Mr. Trump's tariffs. The most important discussion for the Israelis was their planned strike on Iran. Now, another thing that I almost forgot to mention is the fact that there have been talks between the Israelis and the Turks in Azerbaijan. These talks commenced not too long after Donald Trump told Netanyahu to be reasonable when it comes to Turkey. This is the United States. Obviously, the United States has facilitated these talks between the Israelis and the Turks in Azerbaijan. And I think eventually these talks are going to fail because they just have two obstinate and antithetical aspirations. Israel wants to control a part of Syria. Israel wants to be allowed to do bombing raids in Syria against its enemies, who are Islamist fighters, combatants in Syria. And Turkey is not going to want to just sit there and just allow the Israelis to willy-nilly do what it wants and do aerial bombing missions in Syria. Turkey wants to be able to control Syria, and it wants to get the respect of Israel. Does not want Israel to be fearless in the face of Turkey. So Turkey cannot just sit there and allow Israel to do what it wants. It has to do something. And that's why I say eventually there's going to be a clash. It's inevitable. And the clash is going to be over Syria. While Mr. Netanyahu was still at the White House, Mr. Trump publicly announced the talks with Iran, and he did it right to Netanyahu's face. And I think that was a statement by Trump saying, we're going to do talks with the Iranians. You not liking that? Not our problem. And remember, Trump has been critical of Israel in the past. During his first term, Trump criticized the Israeli settler movement, and he said that the Israeli settler movement was an impediment to peace. He said this, and he said that these settlers don't want peace, and he's right. They don't want peace. A lot of them can be very barbaric. So it's not like Trump has been brown-nosing Israel all the time. So it says here that, and I remember everyone saying, look, there's a video of Trump pulling a chair for Netanyahu. You see, we know who rules America. Yeah, that's like when the mafia allows you to sit in the front seat before they strangle you to death. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. In private discussions, Mr. Trump made clear to Mr. Netanyahu that he would not... Now, look at this. I love this. This is the whole Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro conversation in the desert sort of thing. In private discussions, Mr. Trump made clear to Mr. Netanyahu that he would not provide American support for an Israeli attack in May while the negotiations were playing out, according to officials briefed on the discussion. So Trump said it in public. He said, no, we're doing talks with Iran. And that was a big FU to the Israelis. And he's saying it in private. We're not getting involved. And the Biden administration said the same thing. We're not going to get involved in a direct conflict between you and Iran. Sure, we'll help you bomb some sandal-wearing terrorists, but we're not going to get involved in this stuff. This is why I keep telling people, the Houthis are bullshit. They are. They're a bunch of terrorists who run around in sandals. Yeah, sure, they're dangerous to a certain extent, but they're not an existential threat. Hamas, bullshit. It's a giant paramilitary group that got billions of dollars that they pocketed for themselves, and that's it. They're not an existential threat to any country. Hezbollah is a serious paramilitary force, but still not an existential threat to Israel. I wish people could recognize serious existential threats when they see one. Iran, with all of its innovation, with all of its industrialness, existential threat to Israel, absolutely. And when it comes to the serious existential threats, Israel is not very, very tough. They go to the Americans, they go to the Russians. They're scared of Turkey, they're scared of Iran. Well, where's your big badass? Where's your big badass show and dance? Israel could drop a nuke on Iran, but Iran's a big ass country. So you drop a nuke on Iran. Okay. You drop one nuke on Israel, you devastate the country. It's like dropping a nuke on New Jersey. It's a very small country. So the ramifications for Israel is much more severe, just given its size. Israel has long sought America's largest conventional bomb, a 30,000... Holy shit. A 30,000 pound... Ooh, that's a big ass bomb. Hot damn. 30,000 pounds. You can destroy all of Gaza with that, with just one of those. A 30,000 pound bunker buster, which could do significant damage to key Iranian nuclear sites beneath mountains. So the Israelis want the Americans to use their biggest bomb, conventional bomb, on the Iranians. The mother of all bombs. The madre of all bombs. It says here that Israeli and American officials began discussing a plan for an extensive bombing campaign, blah, 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 blah. And it says here that any Israeli attack on nuclear sites would prompt a new Iranian missile barrage against Israel that would require, you guessed it, American assistance. Brigadier General Mohammad Bagheri, the head of Iran's armed forces, said in a speech on April 6th that Iran did not want war and wanted to resolve the standoff with the United States through diplomacy. But he warned, our response to any attack on the Islamic Republic's sovereignty will be forceful and consequential. So there you have it. The United States being not interested in a direct war with Iran. And I'm happy about that. I don't want to see America in another pointless war that'll drag on for years and drain tons of money and human life. And it's horrible.